Oh, hey there.
Hello.
While the internet and its history might seem complicated, it can be broken down and explained in a fairly simple way. What we know as the internet is essentially millions of computers connected together in a huge network. Each computer on this network has its own IP address. For example, one of Facebook's addresses is 31.13.80.36.
So how was the internet born? How exactly did it all begin? Because there has to be a start to everything, right? You didn't just snap our fingers and say like, okay, we're gonna make this with huge networks and bam, the internet was made. That's not how it works. The first use of connecting computers was for the army, actually. In the 1950s, they had radars stationed in a bunch of places in Russia, and they were trying to get some good images of what was going on, but it was a lot of small images, small pockets, and getting those images back to base and organizing that was a real pain. So they connected all of those computers together, all the radars, and they made them all send their images to one supercomputer. And then that supercomputer took all of these small portions and it created one big radar picture, which ended up saving a lot of time to the people working in the army. The only networks that existed around that time were really secluded networks. So basically you had specific computers that had specific jobs. I want you to connect to you, and you guys are all gonna be connected, and that was the limit of what they could do. That was the start of networking. Everybody got sort of hyped about it. They're like, oh cool, we can like connect computers and we can talk to each other and send files without having to physically carry stuff over. But one of the biggest problems is that since everyone was trying to do their own thing, trying to connect their own networks, they all came up with different protocols.
Protocols are sort of like languages. They're used to send instructions to other computers. If two computers don't speak the same language, then the communication is impossible.
They all have their own language to transfer the data. So say one university used English and the other university used French. Well, the computers didn't understand anymore what was going on if you tried to connect the universities together. So they were really restricted in that sense. So in the 1970s, there's a guy called Dennis Jennings. He decided he created his own protocol called TCP/IP, which is actually what we use today. He started really hyping up. He was like, okay guys, we should really use TCP/IP and we should spread one specific protocol so that everybody can connect properly and we can have a uniform language that everyone can use to connect every network without problem. So in 1985, TCP/IP became standardized a lot more. So a huge portion of the US started using TCP/IP instead of whatever protocol they were using before. What this did was it allowed all of the small networks to connect over big networks, which was essentially the birth of the internet. So now that you have a general idea about the history of how the internet sort of came to be, let's get down to defining what the difference between the internet and the web is.
The word internet comes from inter, which means between, and network, internet. So when we communicate over the internet, we're basically communicating between networks.
So the internet is a huge network of networks, and the web is actually how the information is transferred. You use the web to transfer data across the internet to people across the world.
So we know that the TCP/IP protocol is used to send messages, but how exactly does it work?
TCP/IP is actually a link of two protocols. One protocol which turns your data into packets, and the other protocol which tells it where to send that packet across the network. So basically you give it information and you tell it where to go. Sort of like a letter, right? A letter, you write down your letter and you put the address on it. So the address is IP and TCP is really like how it's stored, so like in a letter written with words. Now, do you remember the IP address I told you at the beginning of this video? No, you don't. You don't, do you? No. You think you remember, but you probably missed a number somewhere. There's probably something that you screwed up, because if you get one number wrong, it doesn't work.
To be honest, I didn't even remember it myself.
Did you know that one of Facebook's potential IP addresses is 69.63? I'd have to memorize that though.
One thing that you do remember though is that the address that I gave you at the beginning links you to Facebook. So you remember the word really well, but you don't remember the IP address. So this is what a DNS is for.
DNS stands for Domain Name Service. It helps organize the web in a more intuitive manner by allowing us to remember website names instead of their IP addresses.
What a DNS does is you type in google.com and it'll take those letters and transform it into numbers.
The reason DNSs exist is because names come so naturally to us. However, some websites have some really strange names that we could never find by guessing. This is where search engines come in, and they started a little while back.
The first search engine that was ever made is called Archie. And what Archie did was, it was sort of like the search function on your computer. So you type in a file name and then it'll go over the network and try to find that specific file. Over time, search engines evolved and they became a lot more optimized. There's actually a really cool webpage that Google created that explains how their search engine works and how exactly it shows you the information that it does.
Needless to say, Google is great at what it does. Back in the day, browsing the web was done almost completely anonymously.
One of the big advantages of the internet is the fact that you can't really discriminate against an IP address. When I'm connecting to a website, all it sees is a series of numbers. It doesn't see that I'm the one specifically connecting to that. So the website has no idea who I am, what I like, or any of those things. So one of the things that people really enjoyed about the internet was the fact that you were free to say whatever you wanted and to not be judged just by what you look like.
Nowadays, the web is governed by a concept known as net neutrality. Wikipedia defines this as the principle that internet service providers and governments should treat all data on the internet the same, not discriminating or charging differently by user, content, site, etc. The idea behind this is that a public information network will only be really useful if everything on it is treated equally.
So one thing that the internet really offered was it gave a lot of power to the people. The people had access, well, everyone has equal access to the internet right now. And what that really does is it allows you, like, if you decide I want to start myself a company, I want to put it on the web and start selling things, you can actually do that without a problem.
Here in Canada, there are no laws at the moment that really defend web neutrality. 2 bills were introduced in 2008 with the intent of defending web neutrality, but they didn't pass. In 2011, a bill passed allowing usage-based billing. So the more internet bandwidth you use, the more you pay. Some say this is a form of discrimination against larger media like music, new movies, and videos. Some other countries like Brazil, USA, and Japan have laws that specifically uphold net neutrality. If you've heard that China practices censorship, then you've heard right. The system they use to block websites and articles is known as the Great Firewall of China. As of 2015, it's used to block over 3,000 websites such as WikiLeaks, YouTube, Skype, and Facebook. While the Chinese government likes to keep certain information under their control, they don't ban social networking sites for that reason. China has its own set of social networking sites that its people uses. For example, they have a Facebook lookalike called Renren. In other words, China is practicing censorship for political and economical reasons. Freedom of speech and knowledge on the internet is something great that we have and that we should cherish, because not everyone is lucky enough to have it. All in all, the internet is a place of freedom where videos like this one can be posted and viewed from almost anywhere across the world. So, when you think about it, the road to understanding the internet is sort of like a connect the dots game, every dot representing a functionality. The image as a whole often isn't very clear until you pass through most of the dots. And now that most of the dots have been covered, you should see a nice picture, like maybe a square. Or for people with lots of imagination, maybe a happy face. Thanks for watching.